are set to go.
All right.
Hopefully the folks outside, looks like the audio is working for the outside folks. So we're going to concentrate primarily on, I'm going to talk nonprofit, but most of what we're going to talk about will be work for just about any industry. There's a couple of very specific nonprofit features, but this will be a lot about reporting. If you'll, there's not going to be a very long presentation, so if you would hold your questions to the end, I'll be happy to both continue questions in this group environment and then hang out as long as you like and or the food lasts. Okay. All right, so I'm Jim Scarf. I'm a senior consultant here. I've worked with some of you in the Great Plains world before, but I've primarily been focused on Sage Intacct for about 8 years now. We're going to be looking at Sage Intacct. The name Sage has been around a long time. Intacct was a company started in California about 1999. It has always been an entirely cloud-based solution. In 1916, date myself, in 2016, Intacct was going to go through an IPO when Sage swooped in and acquired them. So point being, any experience you might have had with a Sage product has nothing to do with what we're looking at today. Like Microsoft, Sage owns a bunch of different accounting type programs, but there's zero intersection between this and any other Sage product. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but one of the really the strongest point of Sage Intacct is the reporting, and that has caused a lot of nonprofits to migrate to the Intacct solution because it is very good at parsing data beyond just maybe the account in the department. Nonprofits tend to have much more intensive reporting requirements, particularly if you're involved in grant reporting, restrictions, funds, and such. In turn, as their client base has become about a little more than a third nonprofit, they've started building in nonprofit specific functionality, which I'm going to show you a couple of things here. Likewise, our client base is also about a third nonprofit. You can see some of these names here. This is actually a national slide here, but you can see the Edwards Aquifer here is, they were one of our first Intacct clients. This is also the only preferred solution by the AICPA. They endorse it and they use it. One of the core tenets of Sage versus some of the competing products is Sage has built a core financial system, general ledger, AR, AP, sales, purchasing, and such, and worked very hard to make this system very easy to integrate to. So things that they're not going to try to reinvent are things like payroll. For payroll, we have many choices. Yes, the best one. Yes, we prefer AEP. We love Amanda and her team. Workforce Go is a solution we go to if you want to keep things entirely in-house. But the point being, there are providers who try to provide every module, the suites, if you will, and some of their modules are great and some of them not so much. So Intacct has made things very easy to integrate with. Okay. It is an entirely cloud-based solution. It has always been internet-based only, browser-based only, so there is no install. There's no server maintenance. There are no upgrades. Everybody in the world, about 34 to 6,000 clients worldwide these days, everybody's always on the same version that's updated quarterly. New features, basically, and you'll start seeing little screen flashes of neat little features that are coming, and magically, usually around 1 a.m. on a Sunday morning, they start sending, they basically say, it's here, and I've never seen any kind of a service interruption. It is entirely cloud solution in that some people have had some anxiety in the past. I think it's starting to wane, but there's been some anxiety about putting my data in the cloud. Does it make me a target? Do I lose control? Well, the reality is that your data is in the US, in California, in a world-class data center with, most importantly, world-class security, both physical and network security. They have a redundant data center in Northern California, far away from the earthquake zone. So if that data center were to be physically destroyed, it would fail over in an hour. You wouldn't lose more than 4 hours of work, is their promise. Another advantage of the cloud proposition is the extra capacity. So you've probably all experienced at month end where you go to run a heavy report, and so are 5 other people, and things just slow down. Being in a common data center with a common pool of resources, if you're doing something intensive, your process can expand out to take more processing power. So some of the reports are amazingly fast to process. It's really pretty remarkable. And then, of course, the backup and recovery. Sadly, over the years, we've had some customers get hit by ransomware, and they do not have the ability to restore and recover like they thought they did, or even from hardware failures. People underestimate. Yeah, GP. Yeah, primary. Yeah, exactly. GP and other server-based people, not here. They've never had a security instance. So they keep 96 hours of backups essentially in memory and on site. So if somebody does something foolish and wipes something out, you can, for 96 hours, you can pick any point in time and they'll restore to it. After 96 hours, that information's in another center. And so they need a day I believe they need a day, and you have to pick a whole day. So it's going to be midnight forward for whatever day, should you have, a really bad disaster. So that's the real important piece of the cloud. In my opinion, the cloud proposition is the backup, recovery, and security. All right. So why Express Info? Well, many of you know us and love us. I don't know if we have any entirely new faces today, but we've been under the same management in the same town, and until last year in the same office for 30 years. Our average employee tenure is 15 years. In June, I will be starting my 27th year working for Iris.
Stop you right there. How many years have you been here?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
0 years. Almost 10. I'm a newbie at 8.
Yeah, we have 2 more consultants who, one's been here a few months longer than me, and then another it's been here over 20. So we try to keep our customers forever and keep them happy. Iris likes to keep us happy because
No easy task.
no
either.
easy task. We are a tough group, but we've got sort of a philosophy of the customers first, but family's a close second. Work-life balance is important, and that's why we've been here so long, and that's why our customers see us year in and year out. I saw like some Goodwill folks and like that. I've been with a lot of your companies longer than you've been with your companies, because I was doing server upgrades at Goodwill 20 years ago. Although none of you know me today.
Not yet.
And just in all those years, we've implemented about 600 solutions. All right, so what we're going to talk about today are things that are really important primarily in the reporting area to nonprofits. The ability to quickly isolate grant and project data to get down beyond the account and maybe the department. The system comes with a set of predefined reports, about 42 in all: balance sheets, income statements, cash flow statements, FAS 117, the balance sheet, the 990. Budgeting, if you're grant based in particular, budgeting can be super, super important to nonprofits. And so we're going to look at the ability to report against budget, encumbrance accounting. I'll talk about that for those who aren't familiar with the concept. I'll do a very brief discussion on that. If you're dealing with restricted funds and having to release restricted funds, I know a lot of you, if you do, it's probably only an annual thing. But if it's a monthly thing, I'm going to show you the best thing since sliced bread. And then if you have to do allocations, we're going to talk about allocations, not transaction level allocations where we're entering a bill and okay, I want this bill split based on floor space or across departments or whatever. There's that feature, but the feature I'm going to show you allows you to allocate across, for instance, my benefits or my G&A. Maybe I want to spread all of that. I want to accumulate that in one shared services pool, and then I want to spread it across my grants or funds at month end based on their relative salaries for that month. So it's a dynamic allocation based on account balances. And that's it. So let's dive into the product here. After we wake up the mouse, I've been told that I've been warned I have to touch this screen every once in a while to keep it from going to sleep. So I'm going to do that every once in a while. All right. So this is the interface. I think I'm going to need to zoom in a little bit. This is a dashboard, and much of this presentation is going to be from the context of a dashboard. These dashboards are designed to put all the information you need, be it a report or a list of things to be approved or graphs or whatever, to put everything in a single place for quick access. You can also give stakeholders outside of the accounting system access to these reports for a minimal cost in comparison to a regular accounting user. So before we dive in, I want to sort of give you an overview of the structure of the system. So first of all, I am logged in as Carla, the controller and administrator. And so I have access to all of the modules, which you can see here are plenty. And each of these modules has a very extensive menu. So it can look like a very, very busy, complicated program. But each user will only see the menu items that they actually have security access to. So we can use role-based security or security on individual by individual basis. So if you have somebody who just does accounts payable, they're only going to see accounts payable and a couple things probably in general ledger for purposes of seeing accounts, but they'll have a very clean, streamlined menu. So most of you, I know some of you are on GP and you've got a segmented chart of accounts. So your account number is just a string of text that happens to have some dashes in it. And then you use a reporting tool to parse that out. But every time you add a department or a grant or a project, you have to clone a big range of your chart of accounts and you end up with an enormous potentially chart of accounts. I see smiles and head nodding. All right, so I'm going to use the term dimension over and over again. Dimension equals segment. And it's a pretty common term. It isn't just a Sage term. So in GP, you've got account, maybe dash department, dash location. Well, here, those would be individual lists that are picked from individually. So if I add a new grant or a new fund, all I do is go and add that to the list and I'm done. There's no cloning of accounts. So I'm going to use these shortcuts over here. So this is what the chart of accounts looks like. And basically, if we go down into the expense range, for instance, I've got salaries. Salaries are salaries. In every department, it's salaries. In every location, it's salaries. I don't have 47 flavors of salaries to span all of my different departments, locations, and such. Then after the account, we go into dimensions. So I'm going to focus on two dimensions. These dimensions, you name them what you want. I've got one named department. And so what you're going to see here is I've got 4 departments that are that we're going to call programs. And then another set of departments that would be more management in general. So you can see kind of the roll up. But as people code, enter transactions, they're going to pick the account number and they're going to pick the location. I'm sorry, then they're going to pick the department. And then I've got funds. So we've got this list of funds in our presentation. There are actually, if you're a nonprofit, there are 9 available dimensions. If you're a for-profit, there are 7. You can you can actually buy the additional 2, but if you're using 7 dimensions, you're probably working way too hard and way too long. Okay. All right, so let's go back to this dashboard and look at what we can do with these dimensions. Actually, a couple other places I want to pop into. So this is a journal entry screen, and I'm showing it only. This is the common grid for any transaction. We enter an account, which we can do by simply starting to type the name of the account. It'll autofill based on name, or you can do a full text search. And then you select I select my fund, I select my department, I select my grant. And again, I can take this as far as I want. These are all equivalent as far as reporting goes. So I can, what can I do with project that I can't do with department or grant? Nothing. They're all equivalent. The one dimension that I've named fund does have special functionality, and that is a fund will always be in balance. So if you have a general fund and then a bunch of other funds, and the general fund is operating, paying the AP or otherwise incurring expenses or bringing in revenue for the other transactions, if you have an entry that has a debit in one fund, typically the operating or shared services fund, and a credit in any other fund, it's going to generate due from entries in the background, whether you like it or not. So the fund dimension will always be in balance. Okay, so I had mentioned a report library. So the system comes with 42 predefined reports, and the way these work is when bringing your chart of accounts, we assign each account to a predefined category. So there's cash equivalents, there's AR, AP. And that way you have a working set of reports. Then you can build custom reports all you want using account number ranges. It's vastly easier than any tool you've used before, I promise. And you're going to see that here in a minute. So let's go back to a dashboard. We're going to look at a number of dashboards. This is a controller dashboard, or dashboard designed for the controller. Everything on this dashboard has been created elsewhere. So on this particular dashboard, I've got an income statement, or statement of revenue and expenses, to put my NFP hat on. I've got a list of things that I personally need to approve, because this is filtering to my security. So if I have a standard dashboard for like department heads, but I assign department restrictions on various managers, as they open the dashboard, it filters to their security. So if I have 15 different program managers, I don't need 15 different dashboards cloned with different security settings. It'll filter to their security. Okay, so these they call them performance cards. Most people call these a KPI. These are the one thing that are created on the dashboard, and all you're really doing is selecting a line off of an existing report, and you have the option to compare it to either the prior month, the prior year, to a budget amount, so on and so forth. We can pop these reports out into full screen. Here you see a standard P&L. And this comes to the shortcoming with the sort of traditional reporting approach. I'm trying to manage this small window here, but basically I've got revenue and I've got expenses. Okay, so the account numbers, they tell me what? but they don't tell me where and they don't tell me who. So in this particular case, I've got some pretty big budget variances here and I need some more clarity. So I am going to edit this report. I need to see these numbers across funds. So I am going to come over to my column. And I'm going to find my column that gives me my actual for the current year. And I'm going to tell it that I want it to expand by fund. Okay. Then my personnel expenses are way out of hand. So I want to see where those personnel expenses are coming from. So I could do this to all rows, but it would be enormous. But on my personnel expenses, I want to see this broken out by department. Which departments are driving up. So now if I preview this, here's my prior year column, but my current year column has been exploded by fund. And my payroll is now exploded by department. But only my payroll expenses. So we have great capacity to do that, to basically take any of these dimensions and spread them either down rows or down columns. And for you pivot table fans, which if you've been working in GP long enough, hopefully you are all pivot table wizards. You'll understand the power behind that. Okay. So, yeah, again, in the vein of having everything that I want in one place, I am a purchase order approver. So I can pop this out and it'll open up the window that I approve purchase orders in. So I can get that done, and I would be happy to discuss this topic later because people are always interested in that. So we've collected these dashboards. There's a collection that we've called role-based dashboards. So my controller has one set of interests. My CFO has another set of interests. My HR people have yet another set of interests. So I can control who can reach which dashboards. I can make it their landing page. And it will always filter to what their security allows. So if I don't have access to the operations department and I don't have access to accounts payable, anything on that dashboard that has that data in it's just gonna come up empty for me. Okay. The other thing that we can do under the theme of having everything at your fingertips is if I go down to, let me find other expense if I can, other expenses for this year. All right, so that number is getting out of hand. So that number, I'm sorry, was my other expenses are at $1,379,000. So how did I get to $1,379,000? Any number that's blue is a drill down. So here is this has generated a general ledger that gives me the complete detail on how I got to $1,379,000. It's from a number of accounts. Then if I see a transaction that I want some more color on, I drill on it and I can see the entire journal entry here. This item happened to have come from accounts payable. So I can drill back to the accounts payable transaction and I can view it. He says. Seem to have a connectivity problem here. There we go. All right. So this is a read only, or actually I went into edit mode here, but here is the transaction. I see that it's paid. I can drill back to the check that paid it. I can see attachments that are attached to it. And again, this capability is something that I can drive out to my department heads. I can give them, there's a type of user called an employee user, which you manage just like any other user, but they're read only by definition, with a couple of small exceptions, including submitting purchase orders for approval. Okay. All right, so let's look, okay, yeah, let's look at my CFO's dashboard. Okay, so I've switched dashboards. And on that dimensionality, I can bring a report out to full screen, which I think I need to do here. All right, so this report is a report on my revenue trend. Are you all able to read this okay? Kind of see this? I have the same total repeating over and over again. Okay, so my revenue for the year is 12,799,000. I'm working with multiple dimensions. And so on my revenue transactions, they all have the customer on it, and I can force certain accounts to always have certain dimensions on them. So here's my 13 million by, or my 12.8 by fund, again by department, again by site, which is just another dimension we set up, and again by restriction. But again, it's the same total over and over this year, last year, same number repeating. So that's a good, and I love that report. Okay. The graphs are drillable as well. There is a graphing tool. And so if I pop this graph out, I can drill down, I can get a call out on what this amount is. And then if I can drill down here, it's the same drill down exercise you saw in the other report. It generates a general ledger for that wedge of the chart, and I can drill down all the way to the attachments. And if you want to show these people reports, but you don't want them drilling down to the detail, there's a setting for that that basically says this person can't drill, so they don't drill down to details like payroll that you don't want. Lots of pretty cool capabilities. It's certainly not Excel capable, but it'll do waterfall charts and many versions of lines and area and such.
Can you drop any of these reports themselves?
You can drop anything to Excel. So if I do, well, actually, I can actually take the whole dashboard to Excel, but everything goes to Excel very nicely. So if I take this out and regenerate it to the window, and then I can email it directly from here. I can take it to Excel. It'll go to Excel formatted, and no, these don't end up as numbers or formulas, they're numbers. But they'll come up with this green shading, which is intensity. We've got intensity shading, here's what you see here. So the bigger the number, the darker it is. But we can also do conditional formatting, where if a budget variance is more than 10% over, it turns whatever color I need it to turn. And print always generates a PDF. Okay. All right. On the subject of things that no other product can do to this extent, all of these reports on this dashboard are real time. I can filter by up to 4 dimensions, including the date. So if I want to see this for a single fund, if I select a fund and apply this filter, everything on this dashboard has filtered to this particular fund. There's a couple of products out there that can get close to doing this, but what no product can do is this. And that is, I can go back to whatever time in the past that I want to, and maybe I'm going to apply this, and I will get all the reports regenerated at that point in time. Okay. See, how am I doing on time? Yeah, I'm doing okay, I think. All right, so kind of real quick on the predefined reports. You can see here I've got a 990, the 958 and such. Also, this being web-based, I can, as many times as I want to look at something else while we talk about this report. So I can duplicate this tab. I can do it 10 different times if I can keep track of it. So now I'm in the system a second time, no licensing issues. I can drag this over. All the major browsers will do this because I want to show you, I want to revisit my departments. Okay. So I've got this department list. which basically has these roll-ups that they have no transactional importance. You can't code to these departments, but I do have all of my departments rolling up in the 990 categories of program, administration, and fundraising. Okay. So what you can see here is a 990 is kind of fully exploded. So here's my 990 report, the format, but it's not grouped like I need it. But this one is. This is the same report, but we can create bundles or groups of any dimension. And so I have bundled one set of departments as program services. So I have 4 departments that make up programs. Then I've got, I had a IT, HR, and all that is rolling up into management. And then I've got a fundraising department. So I've generated my 990 for free. Okay. All right. So the real meat of the pain is for some of you, if you're doing grant reporting, if you're funded by grants, especially if you have to get reimbursed for grants, then the first 10 days of the following month is a real drag. All right, so I am on the wrong filter here. Bear with me. All right, so here's a dashboard I threw together just to kind of illustrate the point here. So here I've got a report that is all of my funds. Okay, I've got my revenue, I've got my expenditures, I've got my budget, and I've got my remaining budget to spend. So in this particular case, I've pivoted things from the traditional. My columns are defined by account numbers and my rows are defined by a dimension, in this case, funds. Okay. So this gives me a good view. This could be, if I'm the manager of just certain funds, I could have this filtered down to just my funds. All right. So this is good, but make sure I don't close myself out of the system here. Then typically, though, I want to work on one fund at a time or one grant. I guess I should be talking grant and not fund. But I did gear this toward grant fund. But like I say, these are equivalent. 401B is the one I want to work with. All right, so I filtered it to a single grant or single fund. So you can see I've got this line here because obviously it's the one. All right. And I've added a detailed general ledger just cause. But over here is the real meat of the process is what I try to do is create, sometimes you have to report to United Way one way and Bear County or the state of Texas another way. They have different names for the same accounts. So we try to make individual little mini financial reports that roll up the numbers that you need for that particular funder. So we might have a separate dashboard for different funding source formats or different reporting formats. So for those of you who are hypersensitive to not exceeding budget lines for fear of exceeding or not getting reimbursed for the funds. So what we're doing here is an encumbrance or commitment accounting. So often we pick up clients, nonprofits, because they can't control where they are at month end against the budget. Because even if I get everything in accounts payable, I got people running around spending money that hasn't gotten invoiced. So what we do is we implement the purchase order module. And what we can do is normally the flow is, requisition, purchase order, maybe receiver, and then finally invoice. Well, one of the things that we can do with Intacct is we can have a purchase order or a requisition post to the GL. But that would be a big problem in GAAP reporting. So what Intacct has is called custom books. It's a parallel general ledger. So what we do is we have the PO post to a parallel general ledger so that I can see these commitment numbers. So this is coming from purchase orders. Then when that purchase order is converted to an invoice, the entry in the commitment book gets reversed and the actual expense gets posted into the gap book. So this is why I can see here, I don't know if you can see this here, but I've got my budget, then I've got my actual, what I've been invoiced for. But this is purchase orders to happen at some point in the future. And you see this journal is a custom journal. It is outside of my gap books. So I can force it into reports if I want. But it normally, when I'm producing my gap books, that can't be there. But I can lay it down against actual and budget and do the math to see how much I really have left. And that can be a really key point. And these also have an approval workflow. And these, I mentioned the employee users that are read only. These purchase orders are the one thing they can create, and they can approve them. So if you have program managers or grant managers or whoever who need to encumber expenses to let you know that they've committed to purchasing, they can enter those transactions, and those transactions can be routed to whoever needs to approve them. So we're getting toward the end here. I know this is more fun than you can stand, but all right. Oh yeah, one other kind of neat item that, so this is one accounts payable bill, and we're going to come in here and we're going to look at this. All right. So without giving you a lesson on accounts payable, another budget control vehicle. So you can have multiple budgets. You can have like a beginning of the year plan, but you might have a much more granular operating budget. So there is a feature called spend management. The way spend management works is you define what modules it applies to. So maybe it applies to accounts payable and purchasing, but it doesn't apply to journal entries. That's totally configurable. And what it does is you tell the system to compare what the user is doing to a particular budget. And then if they're entering something that is going to exceed a budget, and this includes encumbrance POs, if they're doing something to take you over the budget line, you can either stop them or just warn them. So I'll show you what that looks like. So here I can click show in spend insight, and I can see that my budget is 68,000. Can y'all see that? My budget's 68,000. So far I've invoiced 66. So if I'm just working on budget versus actual, hey, it looks like I've got 2,000 more to go. Au contraire, somebody's got $5,400 worth of POs out there. So I'm already over budget before I even do this. So when I try to submit this for approval, in this particular case, I have it configured to warn but allow. So here, do this one more time. You're exceeding the budget, but do one more time if you want to proceed. And then this will let me proceed, or it could just be a hard stop. Okay. Restriction release. One of my favorites. Okay, here's a little dashboard that I have thrown together specifically for this purpose here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to track a restricted grant for $100,000. And then we're going to spend some money against it. And then we're going to push a magic button at the end of the month, and it's going to release the restriction based on the expenses coded to that grant. Okay. So what we've got here is this report is basically just listing the grant, the revenue, and its status. So right now we're at temporarily restricted, and this is just a general ledger. So I'm going to drill in And basically, it's pretty simple journal entry. Debit cash, credit grant income, temporarily restricted. I've got a dimension called restriction. Okay. Now, as you enter expenses, your user doesn't have to always say, oh, this expense is unrestricted. We can make the expenses default so that you're really only dealing with that when you revenue. Okay, so we start out on the on January 1 of 2023 with a $100,000 restricted grant. Now I'm actually going to walk my dashboard forward. So let's go to the end of the month now and go to the end of the month and reapply this filter. And again, everything on the dashboard refilters. So now you can see that I spent some money on this grant. Again, this dashboard is hard coded to a single grant, grant 888. So I'm not filtering on grant, but this is one single grant. And so here are the various transactions. Again, here's my initial funding. And here's my expenses. So I need to reduce this restriction down to 61,000 in unrestricted funds. There's an app for that. And this it is. And here it is. So without going too deep far into this window, now I'm going to again do this on a single grant, but this could be done in groups of grants or all grants. So I'm going to go, here's my date range. I want to work on everything up through 131. This is not the grant I'm working on. I'm working on this one. Okay. And essentially, what it's going to do is look for expenses against restricted funds with this status and book an entry with this status. So I am going to generate this. It will go into a queue. And if the world is a just place, this will say pass in a moment. All right. And so if I view the journal entry that it created, it has released the 38,000. So I've got basically we're going in and out of revenue, just flopping the status from restricted to unrestricted. So that if I go back to my dashboard, come on dashboards. You'll see now, if I refresh this, instead of it all being restricted, took my little refresh here. I have my date correct. Yes, so refresh this. All right, and now you can see that this is the magic column we're looking for. So now instead of having 100,000 in restricted revenue, I've only got 61,000 because I just released 38. I know this is tiny. Okay. All right. I believe we're about to hit our last topic here before we open things up for questions. And that is the concept of allocations. Now, for you GP users in the room, which I think there are a number of them, GP's got fixed and variable allocations that is a transaction by transaction type thing. And that functionality exists in here as well. But what we're looking at here is a process, as I mentioned earlier, where at month end in a batch process, I'm going to take one set of accounts like benefits, and I'm going to allocate them across another set of accounts or dimensions, in this case from shared to my various programs, based on the balances in another account, sales, or not sales, salaries. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these out. So I'm just going to show you the results because the actual window is a little complicated to talk to. But so what my columns here are, this column are my salary expenses for the month. Okay. This column is my benefits for the month. So during the month, I've coded all my benefits to shared services, to my shared department. Okay. Then at month end, I run a batch process that says, go allocate benefits in shared services across the other departments based on their relative amounts of salaries. So as the relative amounts of salary change over the months, the relative amount of benefits they get allocated will change over the month. Another example would be something that's a little closer to fixed, and that would be this. Let me pop this out. So here I am tracking head count. One things I meant to show you and didn't is we can track statistical accounts. I believe GP calls them unit accounts, but an account that stores a number. So you can store children served, meals served, grants received, and then divide those into your expenses to see cost per and do that. But here we're keeping just a count of my head count. It could be floor space, it could be whatever. So these are dues and subscriptions expense. And during the course of the month, I've incurred $3,000. At the end of the month, I'm going to reallocate those expenses based on the head count in each department. So in this case, some of it stayed in counseling services because counseling services got head count. When you run these allocations, you can also back them out and redo them. Same with the restriction release. You can back those out. If if something's wrong, you don't like it, you can back it out and do it again over and over again. Okay. Had another point on that and I lost it. Oh well, must not have been that good. All right. Questions? Cool as accounting gets.
The allocation, can you choose drivers?
Yes, it's a really it takes a while to get your head around the window. I typically don't open it because it's a big scary window, but basically you pick what your source is and what your target is and how it's filtered. So it doesn't have to be, these were just account to account across department, but you can do all kinds of sophisticated, you reallocate an account across departments and then reallocate those numbers across the grants within those departments. It can be a multi-tiered, pretty much anything. We've got one client that has 137 allocations that run with one click, and it can also be backed out in one click. Another interesting point is all the reports that I have shown you. So, apologize to those of you who don't use GP, but for those who do use GP, in the general ledger, when you're in a smart list, there's looking at your general ledger detail, there's a field that comes down from either AR or AP. It's called originating master. And it's nice to look at, but you can't do a thing with it. Okay. So in a further demo, we will show how in Intacct, in the transaction windows, go ahead and go to my journal entry page. So I've been focusing on these, but I mentioned earlier, we have a number of dimensions, and those dimensions include the customer and the vendor from accounts payable and accounts receivable. So every time any kind of revenue comes from AR or order entry, or an invoice comes from AP or purchasing, that vendor ID and name are available for financial reports. So I can do a P&L by vendor. If somebody comes and asks me, hey, ABC Printing, where have we coded their invoices for the last 3 years? I don't go to AP for that. I go to the general ledger for that because I can filter my general ledger on any dimension. I can run a general ledger and say, give me every line in this date range that has this vendor on it, or this customer, or this item number, or fund, or grant, or whatever. And so we'll be looking at that in some future meetings. And if there aren't any more questions, I will be mingling around the food.
And before you,
Okay, very good. So that's a good question. So,
ADP. That was actually, that was a great segue, because I was gonna let Amanda talk for a second while Jim's looking this up. Amanda Thrasher is here from ADP, along with some of her other colleagues. She's a co-sponsor of the event with Express, so just wanted to give her a minute to say a little bit about ADP and its integration with Sage Intacct. Also, all of the mugs, it has Amanda's card, a mug from Sage, a little heart candy telling you how much we love you. And if you guys would just take them as a thank you for coming from all of us. So it's got my card, Amanda's card, some pens from Express that if you start to write with them, you'll love. And when they run out of ink, you'll text me and ask me for more. But please take them. So let Amanda have the floor for a second.
Hey, everyone. So who knows what ADP is? What are we most known for? Okay. How many in here are currently ADP clients today? Huh? How many of you are currently ADP and Intacct clients today? One. Yes, two. Okay, great. That's awesome. So ADP, right, we started over 70 years ago as we're known as a payroll provider. Fast forward to today, we serve over 140 countries. We are the #1 HRIS technology vendor in the world. So payroll equates to about 20% of our annual revenue. The rest touches the life cycle of an employee. So from recruitment and onboarding all the way to succession planning and retirement. So ADP has been named the payroll vendor for Sage Intacct, meaning we have bi-directional feeds into Sage Intacct. So what you do here will flow into ADP and vice versa. So it makes the partnership very, very nice. If you guys have more questions about ADP, I would love to, talk to you guys, but thank you all for letting me come in and be a part of this presentation.
thanks, Amanda. So I had mentioned at the beginning that Intacct has tried to make integrating into the system as easy as possible so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. So you can build your own integrations, but if you go to marketplace.intacct.com, you'll see a very long list of providers of a whole lot of solutions. On this marketplace is by no means the complete list of everything that integrates. The only people, of which ADP is one, is the people on this marketplace have submitted their code to Sage for vetting. They've assigned service agreements that basically say problems with the integration are their problem, not your problem. So Sage stand behind or will hold these folks' toes to any technical problems. Now, we've never had a technical problem with ADP because they're big and bad and awesome, but that's how devoted they are to, or committed they are to making things easy to integrate. Do we have any coders in here? Any code writers? Okay. Their entire API, which you would use to code integrations, is also available. No passwords, just developer.intacct.com. Then in every window, be it a transaction or a master record, any integration manager users? No integration manager users? If you want to do imports as an accountant, as a user, any window, the system will generate an Excel template that you can fill in and then reload data, be it vendors, AP bills, journal entries. And so that you don't have to do any account mapping. With a lot of import tools, once you have your file, you have to go somewhere and say, okay, the first column's this, and the next column's this. It generates the worksheet. You can actually rearrange the columns in the worksheet, load it back up. And that's actually how we migrate your history out of your old system. It will process I typically keep it down to 70,000 lines per worksheet, but it'll bulk load huge amounts of data from Excel.
I think Jason had a question.
Yes, Jason.
So.
Okay.
Yes. I know there's. Yes.
If you're going to use Bill.com, you want to use their tools. So, there are a number, Bill.com is a good solution. There's a number of solutions, like Bill.com. The shortcoming, well, or where Bill.com stops is, we talked about the encumbrance accounting, in which case those transactions have to start as POs. Bill.com only integrates at the AP invoice level. You would need to switch solutions to essentially, there's some other solutions. We like one called Use, which will basically, once you have that requisition in there, and then you go into Use, which is essentially like Bill, same thing as Bill.com, but better. You scan your invoice like Bill.com, you code it all up, but it will look into Sage to see if it can find a PO. And if it finds a PO, rather than creating a new document, in Sage, you don't like make a new, well, converting a requisition to a PO or a PO to, it's a one-click thing where you click it, you say convert, and it'll convert it up on your screen into whatever the next document is. Use will do that automatically in the background. And the other thing is that the other down or shortcoming of Bill.com is, I could be wrong on this, but a lot of the AP automations, when you scan documents, that image is in that solution. Use and a couple others will put the image in their solution and put it in. I showed you how you can have, you drill down to attachment. It also puts the attachments into Intacct so that if you part ways or switch solutions, you have all your images. Because I know with Bill.com, you're on there for 5 years and you say, how do you get all my images out? As far as I know is you don't.
So you said you.
It's called YOOZ.
Casey, come on, talk.
That'll be the first phase of the implementation. Really get it built with fact finding, scoping, everything's.
And I also want to take a minute. We were talking about the marketplace, like another great segue. We also have somebody here from Martis, who is a very big budgeting software and reporting for nonprofits. That will be one of our next demos. When we do Sage Intacct, we will also do a demo for Martis to be able to show, because they're, and I just learned this the other day. I've been talking with them for a long time. I did not realize that nonprofit was also their core business. So it's just a really nice match together with what we're doing with Sage Intacct, ADP, and Martis, again, all on the marketplace. So that makes the integration between Martis and Sage Intacct the same as it is with ADP. It makes that integration the responsibility of Sage Intacct. So if something breaks, it's on them to fix. It's not on Martis, it's not on ADP, and they take that responsibility with a lot of weight. So those things don't traditionally have problems because they really make sure those integrations are tight, especially they make sure that those things are going to continue working when those updates happen. So that's really important, why we stress picking marketplace partners over other partners. So,
and there are a number of budgeting solutions available on the marketplace, going from the simple to the extremely robust. You know, we've been in this business a long time, and we have cycled, you know, both through GP and other solutions. We've cycled through a bunch of different budgeting solutions, and they tend to be often bigger implementations than the accounting system. They have a very high failure rate because people just get frustrated. Often they bite off more than they can chew, but I love Martis. We have never had a failed Martis implementation. It's typically, now it may take you longer to get your numbers into it, but if you're not doing the personnel piece of it, you can have it going in a week. It goes in, it reads all your structure out of Intacct, and then it's got all kinds of different tools, but The other reason I like it over some of the other solutions is the general layout, and it's got, if you're gonna budget at the head count level, it's got an HR budgeting that's like a little mini payroll system. So it's kind of a lot of setup the first time, but like any payroll system, basically you got your people, you got your rates, you got your taxes, you got your benefits. So you can go one place, change a benefit cost, and it cascades through your entire budget, and it's easy. Fernandez here just completed the Martis process, and yeah, we love Martis, and that's going to be a future meeting.
So
Presentation.
that will be a future Sage Intacct presentation with Martis.
Yeah, Martis. And then Martis is not it's not if you're staying on your existing system, it'll work with Great Plains, some other accounting system. It may be a file-based integration with Intacct. It's all over the wire, but they did start they've been around a long time. Yeah, they started with churches and then expanded to nonprofits and then expanded to everything.
Anyone have more questions?
Yes, financials. So are the financials generated by another page or there was target?
Oh, no.
Report writer, that's,
So, yes, all right, so,
every time we get an account, we need to go up and play on this side. So
okay.
it's reporting.
All right, let me show you this. This is actually, I love doing this one. So I'm going to go to reports and I'm going to create a new financial report. And we're just going to call it demo. And I've previously defined various rows. So I'm going to select my rows, which I'm going to, let's just do we'll do the 990. Okay, so I'm going to include that. All right. And so we click OK. So now my report is going to have this layout. And then I go over to my columns and I tell it that I want a column for the year. And I want it to be exploded by month. You saw me expand by fund on a report earlier. I'm going to go by time period. I'm going to tell it to do it by months set. See, my data is in 12/31/21. 12-month P&L. Okay. So now that I've got this 12-month P&L, I go to my filters and I say, all right, I want the users to be able to filter this by, I can hard code filters in this, but I can also say, let the user pick their date, which I don't want, and let the user decide if they want to pick a particular fund or not. So I'll hit this prompt and then I'll do save and done. And then when the user goes to run this report, when they click run it, they can pick a fund. If they don't pick a fund, they're going to get them all. But you can also see here that these that don't have numbers on them, there are actually groups of funds. So major funds, whatever major funds is, this is going to be a summary of some set of funds exploded by month.
Like you add an account under say salaries and wages account number.
Correct.
Automatically pull that in.
Depends on how good you are at structuring your chart of accounts.
If
Yes.
you migrate over, if somebody previously did not so great at structuring part of accounts, cannot be fixed.
Yes, one of the things that we do in the migration is we don't want to just turn you loose with the system. The biggest value add that we supply is anybody gets in the system to see, oh, what can I do with this? We sit down and we talk about what the end results look like. We talk about what are you doing the hard way that we might be able to simplify. Who's got spreadsheets that have a tab for 87 grants? And we identify all of that. Then dive in, but if you've got if you've got a segmented chart of accounts, what we need to do is we'll create a spreadsheet. It's got, column one is that segmented string. Then how does that map to each of the dimensions? And once I have that spreadsheet, I have a database where I can slice and dice and make julienne fries and spit out data in the new format to import. So there's two ways to assign an account to a line. There's these categories that I mentioned. So the chart of accounts, when you set up an account number, this quick start category, there's about, I don't know, 50 or so of